The member for Ryan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, will you please advise the House how this government has delivered on its promises to the Australian people?
The Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the member for Ryan for her question and her service to the Australian people. As the member for Ryan, Mr Speaker, when our government came to office in 2013, the pledge was very straightforward. We said we would stop the votes, Mr Speaker. We said we would abolish the carbon tax. We said we would build the infrastructure of the 21st century. And we said we would bring the budget back to surplus, Mr Speaker. And on all these counts, we have been successful, Mr Speaker, in meeting our commitments to the Australian people. Mr Speaker, that is in stark contrast to what happened back in 2007, when the people of Australia chose to go on a different path and elect a Labor government. And I can tell you that the decision they made in 2007, they have paid for a decade because of the fiscal recklessness of the former Labor Party, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, we have stopped the votes and we have ensured they have remained stopped, but the Labor Party has still learnt none of their lessons, of their failures when it came to border protection when they were in office, as we know of only a few months ago, when they came into this place and they voted to weaken their borders, Mr
Members
Speaker.
on my left.
And we know that
members on my left will put their props down. The member for Bruce will leave under 94A. The member for Batten will leave under 94A.
Mr Speaker, it was a carbon tax that the Labor Party said they would never introduce when they went to an election, and then did exactly the opposite thing. And it took this government, Mr Speaker, to abolish that carbon tax. But what do we learn now? The Leader of the Opposition wants to bring the carbon tax back. He wants to bring it back in the form of his reckless emission targets that will put up the price of everything. Under the leadership of the Deputy Prime Minister, we are building the infrastructure of the 21st century, managing our population growth into the future, ensuring that our rural centres are connected with our major centres and that people can get home sooner and safer through our congestion-busting fund. And, Mr Speaker, on Tuesday night, for the first time in 12 years, we have been able to bring the budget back into a surplus, back in the black, and Labor is still in the red, Mr Speaker. That's what we're seeing, and that's what you'll see tonight, Mr Speaker. Our budget back into the black. The last time the Labor Party ever saw a budget surplus, as we know, was in 1989. The Leader of the Opposition back then, I don't know what his hairstyle was like back then, Mr Speaker, but he was running around, I know, at those Labor Vanguard conferences at the time, Mr Speaker, whipping it up with his friends at parties and goodness knows what. But that was the last time that we saw a budget surplus, Mr Speaker, delivered by the Labor Party. But under this government, that surplus has been achieved, the votes have been stopped, the carbon tax has been abolished, and we're building the infrastructure of the 21st century. And on that